Commander Vexnix clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among the Cathara species. The sound echoed through the pristine halls of the Galactic Defense Academy, where cadets from 17 different species trained to become the finest warriors in known space. Well, 16 competent species and whatever the humans were trying to accomplish. Another brilliant question from our resident monkey, Vexnix muttered to his aide, watching as Cadet Maya Torres raised her hand yet again during advanced combat theory. The human female, barely reaching his thorax in height, had an annoying habit of interrupting lectures with what seemed like the most basic infantile inquiries. "Commander," Maya's voice carried that peculiar human accent that made every word sound like a question, "I was wondering about the structural integrity of Zephyrian battle cruisers. Specifically, the junction points between the primary hull and the weapon arrays." The classroom fell silent. Even the usually chattering Blixnoid cadets stopped their telepathic conversations. Professor Gorth Mel, a distinguished Valorian with scales that had survived 3 galactic wars, slowly turned his massive head toward the human. "Cadet Torres," Gorth Mel's voice rumbled like distant thunder, "we are discussing advanced tactical formations, not basic engineering. Perhaps you should focus on keeping up with the curriculum instead of whatever this is." Scattered laughter rippled through the amphitheater. A Cathara cadet named Zix-7 made an exaggerated gesture with his forearms, mimicking confusion. The Rel-Tar students simply rolled their multiple eyes, their crystalline bodies shimmering with disdain. Maya nodded politely, her dark eyes giving nothing away. "Of course, Professor. I was just curious about how those junction points might affect maneuverability during combat." "Curiosity killed the cat," as you humans say, Vexnix called out, earning more chuckles from the assembled cadets. "Though I suppose that requires having a proper predator's instinct to begin with." The human's expression didn't change. She simply made a note in her data pad and settled back into her seat. This had become routine over the past 6 months. Maya Torres asked seemingly random questions, got mocked by instructors and fellow cadets alike, and then went quiet until the next lecture. Honestly, Cadet Zix-7 whispered to his partner, loud enough for half the room to hear, "I don't understand why they even accepted humans into the academy. Their home world hasn't seen real combat in decades. What could they possibly contribute to galactic defense? Entertainment value?" suggested Cadet Quintal, a Rel-Tar whose species prided themselves on tactical brilliance. "I mean, watching them try to keep up with our combat simulations is almost amusing." "Almost." Maya continued, taking notes as if she hadn't heard a word. Professor Gorth Mel resumed his lecture about flanking maneuvers against Draconian dreadnoughts, occasionally shooting disapproving glances at the human cadet who had dared interrupt his flow. After class, Vexnix intercepted Maya in the corridor. His imposing figure cast a shadow over the human, but she looked up at him without flinching. "Cadet Torres," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "I've been reviewing your performance metrics. Your physical capabilities are adequate, I suppose. Your tactical scores are barely passing, and your constant interruptions during lectures are becoming disruptive." "I apologize, Commander," Maya replied evenly. "I'm just trying to understand the material thoroughly." "Understanding requires a certain level of intellectual capacity." Vexnix clicked his mandibles again. "Perhaps humans simply aren't equipped for this level of strategic thinking. Have you considered transferring to the Academy's auxiliary programs? Kitchen duty, maintenance work, that sort of thing?" Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you for the suggestion, Commander. I'll take it under consideration." "See that you do." Vexnix turned away, his multiple arms gesturing dismissively. "The Academy has a reputation to maintain." As the commander stalked away, Cadet Zix-7 approached with several other non-human cadets trailing behind him. "Torres," he said, his voice carrying mock concern, "we couldn't help but notice you struggling in class today. Again, perhaps we could help you with some remedial training." "That's very kind of you, Zix-7," Maya replied, shouldering her equipment pack. but I think I can manage. Can you, though? Quintal stepped forward, her crystalline features catching the corridor's artificial lighting. I mean, your species has never faced a real galactic threat. You've been playing with primitive weapons while the rest of us have been defending civilized space for millennia. Your homeworld's greatest military achievement was what, splitting atoms? Another cadet added with a snort. How charmingly destructive. We were manipulating quantum fields while your ancestors were still figuring out fire. Maya smiled, and for just a moment something flickered behind her eyes. Something that might have given the other cadets pause if they'd been paying attention. You're absolutely right, she said. We humans are pretty new to all this. Still learning, you know. At least you admit it, Zix-7 said. Most of your species has this ridiculous arrogance about your potential. They seem to think being innovative makes up for being inferior. Innovation can be overrated, Maya agreed. Personally, I prefer observing first, learning from others, understanding how things work before jumping in. The group of cadets exchanged glances. This wasn't the defensive response they'd expected. Well, Quintal said slowly, at least you're realistic about your limitations. That's refreshing. Oh, I have plenty of limitations, Maya said cheerfully. Can't fly without a ship, can't breathe methane, don't have natural armor or claws or telepathic abilities. Pretty handicapped compared to the rest of you. Exactly. Zix-7 exclaimed, apparently pleased that the human understood her place. So why keep asking all those strange questions in class? You're never going to reach our level anyway. Maya's smile widened slightly. Like I said, I'm just trying to understand how everything works. Systems, structures, weaknesses. Weaknesses? Quintal's tone sharpened. What do you mean? Oh, you know, Maya waved her hand vaguely. Every system has potential failure points. Every design has compromises. I find it fascinating how different species approach these problems. Before anyone could respond, the corridor's speakers crackled to life. All cadets report to Combat Simulation Bay 7. Repeat, all cadets to Combat Simulation Bay 7 for mandatory cross-species tactical exercise. The group began moving toward the simulation bays, Maya trailing behind them like an afterthought. Zix-7 was regaling his companions with a story about his species' legendary victory over the hegemony rebels, complete with dramatic gestures and sound effects. Of course, the key was recognizing that hegemony ships always cluster their shield generators near the bridge, he explained. One precise strike and their entire defensive grid collapses. Elementary tactics, really. The draconian approach is more elegant, Quintal countered. Why target specific components when you can overload their entire power grid? Their fusion cores are notoriously unstable under the right kind of electromagnetic pulse. Maya listened intently, asking the occasional clarifying question that sent the other cadets into further explanations of their species' military doctrines and technological capabilities. The simulation bay was a massive chamber capable of projecting holographic environments that were indistinguishable from reality. Today's exercise involved defending a space station against waves of enemy attackers using ships from their respective homeworlds. Cadets will be divided into mixed species teams, announced Instructor Vorth Kek, a battle-scarred veteran whose mechanical limbs clicked and whirred as he moved. This exercise will test your ability to coordinate different tactical approaches and technologies. Maya found herself assigned to Team Delta, along with Zix-7, Quintal, and a hulking Brujan named Gorm Thak, whose species was known for their straightforward, aggressive combat style. Wonderful, Zix-7 muttered as they entered their team's command center. We get the human. Look on the bright side, Quintal said, her crystalline features reflecting the holographic displays. She can handle communications or something equally non-critical. Actually, Maya said, settling into the sensor operator's station, I'd like to monitor enemy movement patterns if that's okay. I'm good at spotting details. Fine, Gorm Thak rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Zix-7 can coordinate our attack formations. I'll handle direct assault. Quintal manages defensive systems. And Maya can watch, Zik-7 finished dismissively. The simulation began with their team commanding 3 ships, a sleek Cathara interceptor, a heavily armored Reltar cruiser, and a massive Brujan destroyer. The human observer ship, a modest vessel with basic weaponry and advanced sensors, rounded out their small fleet. First wave incoming, Maya reported, her fingers dancing across the sensor controls. 6 light fighters, approaching from Vector 7 Mark IV. Elementary, Zik-7 said, banking his interceptor toward the approaching enemies. Watch and learn human. This is how real pilots handle combat. His ship streaked forward, weapons blazing. The Cathara interceptor was a marvel of engineering, all graceful curves and deadly precision. Zik-7 picked off 2 enemy fighters with casual efficiency. Impressive, Maya commented, and she sounded genuinely admiring. Your ship's targeting systems are incredibly accurate. Cathara technology is the finest in the galaxy, Zik-7 replied proudly, wheeling around for another attack run. Our neural interface allows perfect weapon synchronization. That's fascinating. So the targeting computer is directly linked to your brain. Of course. It reads our intentions and translates them into precise weapon fire. No manual aiming required. Brilliant design, Maya said. I bet that neural link is the key to your entire combat system. Meanwhile, Quintal was demonstrating the Reltar cruiser's defensive capabilities, her shields absorbing enemy fire, while returning devastating volleys from her quantum cannons. Reltar shield technology is unmatched, she explained as her ship shrugged off a direct hit that would have crippled lesser vessels. Our crystalline matrix can absorb and redirect almost any form of energy. Amazing, Maya said. So the shield generators are made from the same crystal matrix as your bodies. Naturally, we incorporate our own biological crystalline structure into our technology. It creates perfect harmonic resonance, and if something disrupted that resonance, impossible, Quintal replied confidently. The harmonic frequency is unique to each individual Reltar. No outsider could possibly interfere with it. Gormthak, predictably, was taking the direct approach. His Brujan destroyer charged straight into the enemy formation, weapons blazing, armor absorbing tremendous punishment while dealing out even more. Brujan ships are built for one purpose, he growled as his destroyer's massive cannons reduced an enemy cruiser to scrap metal. Hit hard, hit first, never retreat. Your armor plating is incredible, Maya observed. It must be nearly indestructible. Brujan metallurgy is the strongest in the galaxy, Gormthak said proudly. Our ships can ram enemy vessels and come out unscratched. What's it made from? Some kind of composite. Reinforced duranium-tritanium alloy, layered with neutronium mesh. The only weakness is extreme temperature differential, but no weapon system generates enough heat variance to exploit that. Interesting, Maya murmured, making notes on her console. The simulation continued through several waves of increasingly difficult enemies. Each time, Maya asked seemingly innocent questions about her teammates' ships, weapons, and tactics. Each time, they eagerly explained their superior technology and strategies, basking in the opportunity to educate the primitive human. Wave 7 approaching, Maya announced. This looks like a big one. Multiple capital ships, heavy escorts. Finally, Zik-7 said, a real challenge. Maya, try not to get in our way while we show you how this is done. The battle that followed was intense. Enemy ships swarmed around their small fleet, testing every system and strategy. Maya's teammates performed brilliantly, their ships dancing through space in perfect coordination, each species' unique advantages complementing the others. Through it all, Maya maintained her position at the sensor station, calling out enemy positions and movements with uncanny accuracy. Her observations were so precise that her teammates began relying on her tactical assessments without even realizing it. Enemy dreadnought moving to flank position, Maya reported. I see it, Zik-7 replied, already adjusting his intercept course. 3 destroyers clustering around the station's lower docking bay, Maya continued. Moving to engage, Gormthak rumbled. Torpedo salvo incoming, impact in 15 seconds. Shields to maximum, Quintal responded automatically. As the simulation reached its climax, something strange happened. Maya's questions became more specific, more technical. And her teammates, caught up in the intensity of combat, answered without thinking. Zik-7, your neural interface seems to be lagging. Is there a processing delay when you're tracking multiple targets? About 0.3 seconds when handling more than 5 simultaneous locks, he replied, too focused on the battle to wonder why she was asking. Quintal, your shield harmonics are fluctuating. Does that happen when you're rotating frequencies? Only during the transition phase, maybe 2 seconds of vulnerability, Quintal answered absently. Gormthak, your armor plating is taking some serious hits. Any structural stress points I should monitor? Joint sections between primary and secondary hull, but they can handle it, Gormthak grunted. The simulation ended with their team achieving the highest score of the day. As they climbed out of their control stations, the other cadets were congratulating each other on their superior performance. Excellent work, team, Zik-7 said, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Maya, you did adequately with the sensor readings. Thank you, Maya replied with that same polite smile. I learned a lot watching you all work. As they filed out of the simulation bay, Maya lingered behind, apparently reviewing the tactical data on her console. What her teammates didn't see was the small smile that played across her lips as she uploaded a massive file to her personal encrypted storage drive. A file containing detailed specifications, performance parameters, and tactical doctrine for 3 of the galaxy's most advanced military technologies. A file that included precise timing data on system vulnerabilities, processing delays, and structural weak points. A file that answered every single question she had been asking for the past 6 months. Back in the corridor, Zik-7 was already planning their next training exercise. Did you see how perfectly our ships work together? That's what real coordination looks like. Not like those bumbling Terran defense exercises we've heard about. Absolutely, Quintal agreed. It's almost unfair how outclassed they are. I mean, what could humans possibly do against technology like ours? Maya Torres walked past them, heading toward her dormitory with her data pad tucked securely under her arm. If they had been paying attention, they might have noticed that her smile had changed. It was still polite, still seemingly innocent. But now it carried the satisfied expression of someone who had just completed a very important assignment. The first phase of her mission was complete. Now came the interesting part. 3 weeks later, the Academy's morning briefing carried news that sent shockwaves through every corridor and classroom. Commander Vexnix stood before the assembled cadets, his usual arrogance replaced by something that looked suspiciously like confusion. Attention, cadets. I have received word from High Command regarding recent developments in the Outer Rim territories. His mandibles clicked nervously. It appears that Terran defense forces have successfully repelled simultaneous attacks by 3 separate hostile fleets using previously unknown tactical approaches. The amphitheater buzzed with conversation. Zik-7 leaned forward, his 4 eyes blinking in disbelief. Terran forces. But their technology is centuries behind ours. How could they possibly? Silence. Vexnix's voice cut through the chatter. The details are troubling. The enemy fleets consisted of stolen Kithara interceptors, captured Rel-Tar cruisers, and hijacked Brujan destroyers. Ships that should have been invincible against primitive human weapons. Maya Torres sat in her usual back row seat, taking notes with the same quiet attention she always displayed. But if anyone had been watching closely, they might have noticed the slight upturn at the corner of her mouth. Professor Gorth Mel stepped forward, his massive scaled form casting shadows across the front rows. The reports indicate that human forces demonstrated an unprecedented understanding of our technology's operational parameters. They exploited tactical vulnerabilities that should have been unknown to them. Vulnerabilities. Quintal's crystalline voice carried a note of disbelief. Reltar shield technology has no exploitable weaknesses. We've tested it against every known weapon system. Apparently not every system, Vexnix replied dryly. According to the combat logs, human forces used precisely timed electromagnetic pulses to disrupt crystalline harmonic resonance, causing complete shield failures. The silence that followed was deafening. Quintal's crystalline features seemed to dim, her confidence visibly shaken. Furthermore, Gorthmel continued, Cathara interceptors were neutralized using targeted neural feedback loops, overloading their brain-computer interfaces. And Brujan destroyers were disabled through rapid temperature variance attacks on their armor joint sections. Gormthak's rocky features twisted into a scowl. Impossible. No one outside our species knows about thermal stress points in duranium-tritanium composites. Yet somehow, Vexnix said slowly, human forces knew exactly where to strike, exactly when to strike, and exactly how long each vulnerability window remained open. Ia raised her hand. The gesture was so routine that several instructors actually groaned audibly. Yes, Cadet Torres, Vexnix sighed. What earth-shattering question do you have for us today? I was just wondering, Commander, how long ago did these attacks occur? In relation to, say, academy training schedules? The question seemed innocent enough, but something about Maya's tone made Vexnix pause. The attacks took place over the past 2 weeks. Why do you ask? Oh, no particular reason, Maya replied, her voice maintaining that same curious inflection. I was just thinking about timing and coordination. You know, how someone would need to gather quite a bit of detailed technical information to pull off something like that. Zix-7 turned in his seat to stare at the human cadet. For the first time in months he was looking at Maya Torres with something other than dismissive contempt. What are you implying, Torres? He asked slowly. Maya's smile was perfectly innocent. Nothing at all. I'm just fascinated by the logistics involved. I mean, to know exactly when Cathara neural interfaces lag during multiple target acquisition, or precisely how long Reltar shields are vulnerable during frequency transitions. Or the exact thermal stress tolerances of Brujan armor composites. Well, someone would need very specific, very detailed intelligence. The amphitheater had gone completely silent. Every cadet, every instructor, every administrative assistant was staring at the small human female who had just recited classified technical specifications with casual precision. How, Quintal whispered, could you possibly know those details? Maya tilted her head, as if considering the question seriously. Well, I suppose someone could learn those things by asking lots and lots of questions. You know, the kind of questions that might seem naive or annoying to people who think they're so much smarter than everyone else. The realization hit Zix-7 like a physical blow. His mandibles began clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. You, he said, his voice barely a whisper, you were gathering intelligence. Was I? Maya asked, her tone still perfectly conversational. I thought I was just a primitive human trying to keep up with my intellectual superiors. At least that's what everyone kept telling me. Commander Vexnix stepped forward, his multiple arms moving in what could only be described as threatening gestures. Cadet Torres, are you admitting to espionage activities against Academy personnel? Maya stood slowly, her movements calm and deliberate. When she spoke, her voice had changed. Gone was the uncertain, questioning tone. In its place was something cold, professional, and utterly confident. Commander, I am Lieutenant Maya Torres, Terran Intelligence Division. Assigned to Operation Looking Glass under direct authorization from the Galactic Defense Council. My mission was to assess potential security vulnerabilities in Allied military technologies through passive intelligence gathering. The amphitheater erupted in chaos. Cadets were shouting, instructors were demanding explanations, and somewhere in the back, a Blixnoid fainted dead away. Impossible. Vexnix roared above the noise. Humans don't have clearance for classified technical assessments. Maya reached into her jacket and produced a small device that projected a holographic display. The image showed official seals from all 17 member species of the Galactic Defense Council, along with authorization codes that made Vexnix's antennae droop in recognition. Actually, Commander, we do. As of 6 months ago, Terran forces were granted full intelligence access following the Proxima incident. Apparently, the Council decided that having allies who actually understand each other's capabilities might be useful in a real crisis. Professor Gorth-Mel stepped forward, his massive frame trembling with what might have been rage or humiliation. You used us. You tricked us into revealing classified information. I asked questions, Maya corrected gently. You chose to answer them. In fact, you seemed quite eager to demonstrate your technological superiority to the ignorant human. I simply listened and remembered. Zik-7's voice was barely audible. Every question, every simulation, every casual conversation. You were recording everything. Not recording, Maya said, analyzing. There's a difference. My mission parameters specifically prohibited any form of electronic surveillance. Everything I learned through direct observation and voluntary disclosure. Voluntary. Quintal's crystalline features were now pulsing with angry light. We never volunteered anything. Maya's smile returned, but now it carried a sharp edge that none of them had seen before. Really? Because I distinctly remember Zik-7 explaining neural interface processing delays and Quintal describing shield harmonic vulnerabilities, and Gormthak detailing armor stress points, all while bragging about how superior your technologies were to primitive human systems. The truth was sinking in, and with it came a collective realization that was both humbling and terrifying. For 6 months they had been teaching their most closely guarded military secrets to someone they considered intellectually inferior. The simulations, Gormthak rumbled, his voice heavy with understanding. You weren't learning to fight alongside us. You were learning to fight against us. Not against you, Maya corrected. The intelligence I gathered was used to defend against stolen versions of your technologies, ships and weapons that had fallen into hostile hands. The enemy fleets that attacked our colonies were using Kithara, Reltar, and Brujan equipment. Thanks to your educational enthusiasm, we knew exactly how to counter them. Commander Vexnix was silent for a long moment, his compound eyes fixed on the human officer who had played them all for fools. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and deadly. You realize this means your species has detailed knowledge of our most sensitive military capabilities. Maya nodded. Yes, we do. Just as you have detailed knowledge of ours, thanks to the intelligence sharing agreements. The difference is, we didn't assume you were too stupid to understand our explanations. The insult hung in the air like a physical presence. Around the amphitheater, the galaxy's most elite military cadets were confronting the uncomfortable truth that they had been outmaneuvered by the very species they had dismissed as inferior. So what happens now? Zik-7 asked, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Maya looked around the room, taking in the shocked faces, the angry glares, the expressions of grudging respect. Now we continue training together. Because despite what you might think, my mission wasn't about proving human superiority. It was about ensuring that our alliance actually works when we need it. She gestured toward the holographic display still floating above her device. The Proxima incident wasn't just an isolated attack. Our intelligence suggests coordinated strikes against multiple allied worlds using stolen technology from all our species. The enemy isn't just learning to counter human weapons or Cathara ships or Reltar shields. They're learning to use them. Professor Gorth-Mel's expression shifted from anger to concern. You're saying this was preparation for a larger conflict. I'm saying this was preparation for the larger conflict that's already begun, Maya replied. 3 human colonies have been attacked in the past month. 2 Cathara research stations have gone dark. A tar mining operation was destroyed last week using what appeared to be Brujan weapons. The implications were staggering. If an unknown enemy had access to technology from multiple allied species, the entire balance of galactic power was at stake. How do we fight an enemy that knows all our weaknesses? Quintal asked, her earlier hostility replaced by genuine fear. Maya's smile returned, but this time it was warm, confident, and oddly reassuring. The same way humanity has always fought superior opponents. We adapt, we improvise, we learn from our mistakes, and we keep moving forward. She looked directly at ZIX-7. Your neural interface technology is incredibly advanced, but it has that processing delay. So we work together to develop tactics that account for it. Maybe human reflexes can cover that gap while your precision handles the targeting. She turned to Quintal. Your shields are nearly invulnerable, except during frequency transitions. So we time our formations to provide overlapping coverage during those vulnerable moments. Finally, she faced Thak. Your armor can withstand almost anything, except extreme temperature variance. So we make sure you're never fighting alone when thermal weapons are in play. The room was quiet again, but this time it was the silence of contemplation rather than shock. You're talking about integrated tactics, Commander Vexnix said slowly. True cooperation rather than parallel operations. I'm talking about what we should have been doing all along, Maya replied. Instead of competing to prove who's superior, we should have been learning how to complement each other's strengths and cover each other's weaknesses. ZIX-7 stood up, his movements tentative but determined. Torres, Lieutenant Torres, I owe you an apology. We all do. No, Maya said firmly, you don't. You acted exactly as expected based on the intelligence profiles we had developed. Arrogant, competitive, eager to demonstrate superiority. Those aren't character flaws, they're cultural traits that have served your species well in countless conflicts. She paused, letting that sink in. The problem wasn't your attitudes. The problem was that we were so busy focusing on our differences that we forgot about our common enemies. Professor Mel stepped forward, his massive head nodding slowly. You said Operation Looking Glass was about assessing vulnerabilities. What did you conclude? Maya's expression grew serious. Our greatest vulnerability isn't technological. It's psychological. We're so convinced of our own superiority that we underestimate everyone else, including our allies. She gestured around the amphitheater. For 6 months you've been teaching advanced military tactics to cadets from 17 different species. You've been sharing knowledge, developing strategies, building relationships. This academy represents the greatest concentration of military expertise in the galaxy. And yet, Vexnix said quietly, we learned more about each other in the past 10 minutes than in the previous 6 months. Exactly, Maya nodded, because for the first time we're talking to each other instead of at each other. Thak's rocky features creaked into what might have been a smile. You humans have a saying about teaching old dogs new tricks. We also have a saying about strength in unity, Maya replied. Separately, we're just collections of advanced technologies with predictable weaknesses. Together, we're something new, something our enemies haven't seen before and don't know how to counter. The silence that followed was different from the others. This was the quiet of decisions being made, of perspectives shifting, of old assumptions giving way to new possibilities. Commander Vexnix straightened to his full height, his mandibles clicking in what Maya now recognized as determination rather than amusement. Lieutenant Torres, he said formally, I believe your mission parameters have changed. Operation Looking Glass is complete. Now we begin Operation Mirror Shield. Maya raised an eyebrow. Mirror Shield. A new training protocol, Vexnix explained, designed around integrated tactical development. No more species-specific exercises, no more competitive rankings. From now on, every simulation, every exercise, every lesson will focus on cooperative strategy. And Professor Mel added, every cadet will be required to demonstrate proficiency with at least 3 different species technologies. Real proficiency, not just theoretical knowledge. Maya looked around the room at the cadets who had mocked her questions, dismissed her capabilities, and treated her like an amusing curiosity. Now they were looking back at her with expressions that ranged from respect to embarrassment to genuine curiosity. "But, you know," she said finally, "I think this is going to be fun." Zik-7's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement. "Fun? Lieutenant, I think you humans have a very strange definition of fun." Maya grinned. "You have no idea. But stick around and I'll show you exactly what human creativity can do when we stop asking polite questions and start looking for real answers." As the cadets filed out of the amphitheater, the conversation was already shifting from shock and embarrassment to excitement and speculation. For the first time since the Academy's founding, students from different species were actively seeking each other out, eager to share knowledge rather than hoard it. Maya lingered behind, updating her mission logs on her data pad. Operation Looking Glass had been a complete success, but Operation Mirror Shield would be far more challenging. It was one thing to gather intelligence on potential allies. It was another thing entirely to forge them into a truly unified fighting force. But as she watched Zik-7 demonstrating neural interface techniques to a fascinated Reltar cadet, while Gormthak explained armor composite theory to a group of mixed species engineering students, Maya felt cautiously optimistic. After all, humans had always been good at bringing out the best in unlikely partnerships. And when the real enemy finally revealed themselves, they would discover that the galaxy's defenders had learned something new. They had learned to fight as one.